AB5 is going to have a ton of unexpected consequences, and a lot of those have yet to be seen. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Gig Nation. I'm Jonathan. We break down the latest in gig economy and rideshare news. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already joined the Facebook group, I will leave a link down below. Brand new Facebook group, so make sure you get in there. All right, everybody, today we're going to be looking at AB5, and for those of you that don't know, 10% of the workforce in California are independent contractors. They are now going to be reclassified as full-time employees. What we are witnessing is a giant social experiment, and that's because AB5 recently passed Senate. It's expected to be signed, go into place, and turn all independent contractors into full-time employees. So this is going to have a ton of unintended consequences, and in this video we're going to kind of break those down, consequences that we expect to see. Now obviously we can't entirely predict what is going to happen as AB5 kind of comes out and plays out in the environment in California, whether or not it spreads to other states. We don't really know how this is going to work out, but we can definitely make a lot of predictions. And so I'm going to quote from a couple of sources. All of these predictions are kind of backed up by different sources that I've looked up, and I've done extensive research here. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into it without wasting any more time. The first prediction is that drivers and delivery drivers are no longer going to be able to decline rides and decline orders. That is a kind of something that you're allowed to do because you're an independent contractor. As an employee, it's not in your right to decline an order or decline a ride. If you've been in the gig economy for a long time, think back to like 2014, 2015, 2016. If you had been driving for Uber or Lyft, it was highly discouraged to let your acceptance rate drop below a certain amount. You could actually get deactivated for this. Now changes were made because drivers, food delivery drivers, rideshare drivers are independent contractors, and it is well within our rights as independent contractors to decline those rides and to decline those orders. But if we are now reclassified as full-time employees, we no longer maintain that right. The second unexpected consequence is more restrictive scheduling. Now, this is something that a lot of rideshare companies, Uber and Lyft, have definitely voiced leading up to AB5, and a lot of drivers don't agree with it. They think that these rideshare companies should be able to maintain that flexibility. But one of the reasons why they may not be able to is because they, under this new environment, as employees are now, or as drivers are now full-time employees, they're being paid by their time, not by gig. So if there's not a lot of demand, you can't necessarily just sign on, because rideshare companies will have to compensate you for that time that you're on the platform. And so they will now have more restrictions. You can't sign on if it's not busy, and you may have to schedule out shifts further in advance. So the whole on-demand flexible lifestyle could change a little bit. We're not exactly sure how this is going to pan out, how it'll work out. But if you do food delivery and rideshare, you've probably noticed that working for a company like DoorDash, if you try and go online, it's not always available. You can only really do it when demand is there. So we may definitely see a model like that adopted by Lyft and Uber going forward. The third unexpected result of AB5 is that we could see less drivers out there on the road. And in the past, rideshare companies, food delivery companies like Lyft, Uber, DoorDash, all kind of just hired out as many potential drivers out there on the road as possible. And that was because they wanted to be able to meet demand when it spiked. So they wanted to always be able to have enough drivers to pick up riders and to deliver food. But under AB5, employees become more expensive. So hiring on as many of them as possible is no longer going to be feasible for rideshare companies and food delivery companies. So we may see a cutback in drivers, and they may be working more full schedules. We could also see a lower pay for certain rideshare and food delivery companies. Now, we have witnessed Lyft cutting rates in a lot of major cities nationwide. Now, there's definitely been speculation that they've been cutting these costs because they are expecting to see more costs in California associated with doing business there. So in order to kind of make up for those losses that they're going to see in California, they have been cutting wages of drivers in other cities. Now, it's not clear yet if we're going to be seeing Uber doing similar things, applying similar tactics and cutting wages in certain states. So we don't really know if this is going to catch on, if it's going to spread, or how much entirely this is linked to the AB5 bill. So the fifth unintended consequence actually spans outside of the rideshare industry. And for those of you who are familiar with AB5, you probably think about it as a rideshare bill, maybe even as it relates to DoorDash, but it's all encompassing to all independent contractors in California. And that means that it also is going to have some reach that kind of wasn't anticipated, wasn't expected. So I pulled up an article from variety.com, and it talks about how AB5 could drive a ton of independent music makers out of California. And essentially what it's saying here is that a lot of music makers essentially hire out independent contractors. So think about, like the 15-year-old girl who's making music, putting it up on YouTube. She's monetizing that, and she wants to hire out, maybe a friend to play in a song, or she wants to hire out a choreographer for a video. A lot of AB5 could potentially classify independent contractor hires like that as employees now. So now, this young girl who's trying to grow her music business all of a sudden has to think about stuff like withholding taxes, benefits, timesheets, and a lot of these things she's probably not expected to handle at that age. So AB5 does provide the potential for industry exemptions, and the idea here was to kind of limit it throughout certain industries where maybe it would have negative consequences. But just getting an exemption might not necessarily be that easy. Uber and Lyft have actually prepared to spend $90 million to get their own exemption. So for an industry like independent music makers, how exactly do they unite and form a group, collaborate to make sure that they get an exemption and to make sure that this does not impact their industry? Another big unintended consequence that you could see happening is a lot of companies actually leaving California. So according to HRexecutive.com, doing business in California as a company is already difficult. There's already a lot of existing compliance that doesn't exist in other states. So it's already more complex. And then adding AB5 just makes doing business in California significantly more expensive. It doesn't take too much to figure out that if business is expensive to do, some companies just won't do it. They're either going to find a way to fight it, find a way to lower costs, or just no longer do business there. And the final unintended consequence that we're going to see is a ton of lawsuits and litigation, and we're already kind of gearing up to see some of those. It's kind of clear that Lyft and Uber, DoorDash are probably going to put up a fight here, but as cost of business rises and the complexity of having thousands of employees that were previously independent contractors is really just an enormous burden to have. Companies are going to fight that. We've seen here a recipe for a ton of litigation. So we're really at the beginning here. We're not really sure how this is going to play out, but it is expected that there will be a ton of lawsuits to follow. So that pretty much sums up the list for all of the unintended consequences. Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of these are speculation. Obviously, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not pretending that I know, but it is kind of, important to think about what could happen here, how this could play out, because a lot of times we make emotional decisions to support or not support a bill, based on, like someone else is benefiting off of this, someone else is profiting off of it. I don't like that. I dislike them. I want business to be more difficult for them. But the consequences and results of that could actually be negative for a lot of people. And, I'm not saying I'm out here not supporting AB5. I actually think AB5 is potentially the greatest negotiation tool on behalf of rideshare and delivery drivers. And kind of what I'm hoping here is that lawmakers are going to negotiate, because we've already seen that Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash here, probably will negotiate. Uber and Lyft have said that they want to implement a new minimum wage. Now, I don't think they're doing a good enough job of negotiating, but we now see a lot more leverage in the hands of lawmakers who do care about independent contractors. They want to see their wages raised. They want to see those hired. And so AB5 could be a great tool to negotiate that. And hopefully that's what we see. Hopefully, in my opinion, the best potential result here is to see a negotiation for higher wages and, potentially some other type of benefits for independent contractors, and that way they are more taken care of. But reclassifying them as full-time employees probably isn't the best solution. That's my personal opinion. So hopefully what we see is just an open conversation and a dialogue that leads to benefits for the independent contractors. Let me know what you think. Leave a comment down below and let me know what you think the results of AB5 are going to be. If it's really going to have all of these unintended consequences, if it could potentially spread nationwide. I'd love to get the conversation going and hear a lot of different viewpoints here. As always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for all of the latest gig economy updates and news.